As I understand it, you have a few different training survival kind of tiers that someone can do with you. The most primitive.
Yeah, like no tech, low tech, or high tech.
No, maybe that's the born primitive one. And then medium tech, and then the high-end one where they're got weapons and stuff. Break those down for us and just walk us through that experience.
As far as high tech, low tech, and no tech, I kind of call those my three praxis that you can operate in. And if they find themselves like, look, I have no desire in any way, shape, or form to live in a cave for a month, they're more on that high tech side. If we're in that no tech, that's stone tools, you pull out your knives. We've all made stone knives. That's what we're using for a duration of time. We're wearing animal skins and everything comes from the land. That is all about an environment where you're surviving. Out of all three zones, the high tech, the low tech, the no tech, it's based on the individual, what they want to learn based off their pattern of life, and then it's a slow introduction into other things.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. Today, our guest is Donnie Dust. Very interesting bio. Donnie was a former Marine, served as a counterintelligence and infantry specialist. After leaving the military in 2011, he began teaching survival skills to the Department of Defense. He runs Paleo Track Survival, a top survival training school in Colorado, and has nearly 20 years of experience in outdoor and primitive skills. He's also the author of 3 books, Wild Wisdom, Scavenger, and Earth Roamer. And outside of teaching, Donnie lives in the Rocky Mountains and works as a technical consultant for survival-related TV and film projects, including shows like Alone and Mud, Sweat, and Beards. Also, pretty big following on social media and YouTube, so check him out on YouTube and social. But Donnie, welcome to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. This is quite the honor. I've seen your guys' shows. This is quite the honor. So thank you.
Good, man. Good, man. Well, if you're listening on Spotify, click the little thing so you can see what Donnie looks like. Looks like an absolute fucking legend. And it kind of makes me want to grow the beard out a little bit because I feel like in the flow, I got about 2 more years of flow growing to get to your level.
Yeah, it's all about the flow.
And I understand you played football at one point. So if you had rocked that helmet flow, that would have been on another level. Can you imagine?
Yeah, it was in that era, like high school and then into the short stint in college, it was all that mohawks, shaved sides, just as savage as you could look, It was, you're a teenager at that point, so you got to go hard.
Yeah, I was a mohawk guy at one point. And
I could see
middle
you as a mohawk
linebacker
guy.
in college. I showed up to camp like 240 with a mohawk, like let's fucking go. But I digress. But Donnie, let's kick it off. Just give us a quick rundown on you, man.
Yeah, so I mean, like you guys said, I was in the military. I was in the Marine Corps. Served as a infantryman right up front, and then did that old lat move into the counterintelligence field where you're doing kind of clandestine source ops for DoD lower level sources, kind of more that tactical sort of threat. And then did a bunch of deployments, and I have 2 sons, one that's 18, getting ready to head out the door to Africa and Europe, just kind of on his own mission, worked hard, saved some money. And then I got one that's a sophomore in high school. He plays lacrosse, rock climbs, snowboards, currently has a broken hand because he'll break something and then wait 3 or 4 days later and be like, should it be this swollen? And it's like, all right, dude, you broke it, But yeah, I live in Colorado with my fiance and run some schools here, run some classes, and I'm always out in the bush, really into that primitive skills, kind of showing folks how to kind of connect more to that primitive lifestyle, if you know what I mean, whether it's strictly hunting all of your food from the land and sourcing your medicinal plants, which is kind of my fiance's wheelhouse. But yeah, it's a constant for me. It's what I do full time, whether it's teaching, whether it's writing, whether it's guiding groups out for kind of remote backcountry experiences. It's ironic. Born Primitive podcast. This is it's in my wheelhouse and definitely something I enjoy. But it's been a long journey. I've had some ups and downs, especially after the military, and even to this day. But it's kind of about building in adversity and just being able to adapt and overcome to kind of really any situation. So yeah.
Love
little
it.
snippet of the dust.
Yeah, that's a good recap. Talk a little bit about your experience in the Marine Corps. How did that go?
Yeah, the Marine Corps was really kind of the foundation stone. I mean, I always had a love for the outdoors, but the Marine Corps in this kind of weird way reinforced it, you know, especially as an infantry guy. It was not hard to recruit me into the infantry because they kind of hit that pitch. You like the outdoors, you like guns, you like shooting, you're like, yeah, come on in, we got a spot for you. But as you know, I progressed in rank and then, you know, time in service, you started to see the benefits, the pros and the cons and the opportunities that existed. And I took every one of those opportunities and leveraged it. Was there, you know, if it was a school going over like monitor survey decon on like NBC threats, or learn how to fix a Humvee, and like just any school that kind of presented itself to me, mostly survival schools, it gave me an opportunity to kind of learn from different people. And it gave me an opportunity to really establish ground truth into a lot of the things that I teach today and I kind of write about in my books. And then, you know, after a period of time, I wanted to do more than just the infantry. And the counter intel field was a good option. A lot of CI human guys in the Marine Corps side, we attach to ODAs, we attach to different SEAL teams um, in different capacities, maybe not a full attachment, but more in support of, whether it's collecting that battlefield intelligence for, you know, follow on targets or doing interrogations. I mean, you could go into the dynamics of all of that for probably, you know, a good year, if you will. But the Marine Corps was that that place, that brotherhood that really gave me that mindset going forward. No matter like how hard a day could be, I can always take where I'm at presently and put it back on a Marine Corps day and be like, man, it's not as hard as this. Sack up, let's move forward. Just go with it. It's kind of funny because I was just out with 8 veterans up in Montana in Big Bear country, and it was all about kind of reconnecting with old veterans, some Navy corpsmen, and just shooting the shit, having a good time, catching some fish, telling war stories, you know, and also kind of being another form of an outlet in this day and age for a lot of veterans to be like, hey, you know, that old saying like, hey man, if there's a problem, just call. Well, sometimes that isn't enough, you know what I mean? So we went out there in support of one guy specifically, and he had kind of all impacted us in our careers and our military careers, and we just wanted to be there for him and just get out there and just kind of live like savages, but like 45-year-old savages. There's a lot more air mattresses. I didn't have one. I slept on a pile of ferns and moss, but it's just funny to, you know guys 20 years ago and then see how they kind of transformed and where they're at in their lives and mortgages and kids. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I still don't have a microwave. I'm going mule deer hunting in 3 weeks. So, you know, it's a different world, but it's just good to connect. Marine Corps established it all.
Donnie, is that part of the fuel? Like doing some prep work for you, it's so obvious how much you love the outdoors, love the survival side of things, and kind of on that thread of you taking the 8 veterans out there. When you, as somebody who lives that life on an everyday, and then when you look at kind of the trajectory of society right now, when you're able to take individuals and probably see that reconnect happen, some probably on a small scale, and then others, I'm sure if you do an extended stay, you really see kind of like that innate part of us come back online. Is that part of your fuel, seeing that reconnection happen for other individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of call it the rewilding. Every one of us, when we're born, we are the wildest form of life, and we slowly evolve into kind of a conformed way. And I think those of us that went to the military, we can kind of break that conformity, even though the military is very you conform. But when you get those folks out there and they make a fire, or they, you know, sleep under a pile of leaves and they're looking up at the sky and they see the stars, like, God, I live in the city and I never get to see this. Those like nuances of being in the outdoors, drinking from a spring, seeing a giant moose in a field, it's those little things that I think starts that rewilding sort of way of life for folks. Even if they're going for a hike in their local park or on a weekend, they're like, you know what, let's just punch out and spend one night in the bush. You can see it, you can sense it, and you can see something really in everybody that kind of it's like a little bit of a switch, and it's slowly being turned forward and forward and forward until eventually it clicks and they're like, you know what, I'm going to put in for a hunt tag, I'm going to get meat for my family, I'm going to go cut firewood instead of buying it from, you know, the roadside place down the way, I'm going to grow some vegetables, I'm going to do these things that kind of reconnects you and rewilds you to the land. So a lot of them are just so slow introductions. And then there's the more extreme side where folks want to go out and they truly want to wear, a loincloth and buckskins and take all their game from the land and smoke it and preserve it. And I provide all those, but it's really those ones that are kind of, a computer programmer or someone that's a teacher, and they get that little taste of what it is to be a little feral. And that feral side is really where we belong, to be honest with you.
And do you, if you zoom out and once kind of on the thread of like the direction society's going, like as somebody, and Bear knows I'm kind of a nerd about like farming, water. I grew up on a 200-acre farm. So it was so normal for me at 6 to be going out with a 22 hunting squirrels. And I see how big of a foundation that gave me just to have an appreciation for nature. And like my fiance and I and our kids, like it is something like we are on the weekends, we're outside all day. Like that is what we're trying to do because that's where we feel most connected. And the question I have for you that this is, it's a personal just fascination I have in an optimism, but I always check myself and say like, am I delusional in this optimism? Is that I feel like people like with technology, with even mental illness right now, with obesity, like those could all be viewed as bad things. But what I've seen, and it's weird, like especially over the last 5 years, I feel the interest is growing more and more towards that reconnection. And there's where I'd love somebody like you that lives that life. Like I think we had to kind of forget nature, become extremely detached to remember just how important it is to literally our central nervous system as human beings. So do you remain optimistic, or do you look at society and you're like, good Lord, like look at the direction we're going on a whole?
Yeah, I have some optimism, but I believe it's in like small pockets of people. And hopefully those small pockets can influence at a local level. Social media is a great thing as far as promotion and marketing a business and doing various, kind of posts or videos, whatever, to kind of reach an audience. But it's really, I hear a lot of people say conversations are good. Conversations are good. And I'm all for a conversation, but a conversation is only going to get you so far. It's action. Action is what is really the most indicative of an outcome. So we can conversate about something, but until action is taken, you're just sitting there, yapping away. So I think when people talk about a lot of these things, it's great because that's that first kind of like click forward, but it's the actions they take. And I have a feeling, and I'm very optimistic in certain ways, that through exposure, through social media exposure about the outdoors and hunting and foraging and growing your food, people will start to kind of take a little bit of action, even if it's planting a pot in their backyard and growing some basil. And then understanding that maybe that basil, that oregano, and maybe another herb have medicinal value. And that starts that kind of roller coaster kind of going forward into things. But I mean, it's way easier to sit on your phone and peruse for, 4 or 5 hours looking at different things. But that's the conversation phase. That's that conversation. You're not really having one with your phone, but it's just back and forth. But the action is the key. So I hope people start to take that action, and it's going to really start at that local level, finding individuals like yourself, myself, that do go out and do these things. And then they start to get that little bit of curiosity, because that's what we're led by, is curiosity.
Well, and I think you do a good job. And I was listening to you on Derek Wolf is an ambassador of our outdoor kind of line we have. So was listening to you on there, and I like your approach where like you as an individual would be like, people would consider you hardcore, but I love that you kind of meet people where they're at too. It's like, hey, I'm not going to just take you out and beat you down just to beat you down, because what you said is important, is that like people who, if you've lived in the city your whole life, you can't be expected in a year to be going out hunting, providing your own food, growing your own vegetables. Like it has to happen in steps. And that's like, for me, it kind of, as you trace it back further and further, it relates to sovereignty as individuals, meaning like, and I'm sure you're an extreme example, way, way, way better than myself, where like, as you learn to, hey, I can kill a deer, skin it, have the meat in my freezer, I can grow a garden, like it gives you a level of sovereignty. And when you zoom out on the macro right now at the political landscape, so much of it is people just screaming at each other, when I think like if people were to take back a little bit of their own sovereignty and realize like, I don't give a shit about the big man because I can sustain for myself, like it like as a country, we would take a deep breath and be like, holy shit, we got caught up in a game simply because we were so reliant on big mommy or big daddy to take care of us. So
it's you call it wilderness self-reliance, you call it medical self-reliance. There's so many self-reliance things that we historically have known, but we've lost as this world has become very easy in certain ways. And it goes to this organization that I belong to. Is called Survival Mastery. And it's an online program that has subject matter experts in, canning food, beekeeping, growing food, botany, survival, bushcraft. And it's a collective group of individuals that aren't on YouTube, because YouTube can get very skewed and stuff. And I always question, what is that person's ground truth? Are they actually out in the bush? If you turn that camera around, is there a car sitting there with a hibachi and a cooler full of beer? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's camping, if you know what I mean. So Survival Mastery is designed to take those subject matter experts, people who have walked from all the way the entire length of South America, people who have navigated through the Australian outback, spent months living in caves, and have all these unique skills, and they're coming together to provide that education and self-reliance. It's going to be a great platform, and it's something I'm pretty proud to be part of. But it's that sort of thing, because we've identified those gaps in that kind of education sort of forefront. So Survival Mastery will answer those key things. I mean, if you want to learn how to keep bees, you can go on various social media platforms and find those sort of solutions. But like, who's that 40-year beekeeper that has totally, repopulated an entire valley because of their bees? It's all of those points of self-reliance, and gives you something to really fall back on in those kind of questionable times. Because, in it's October 19th, I'm teaching a class on how to butcher North American bison. This one's 2,400 pounds with stone tools. Taking something like a stone flake like this and fully breaking down a bison, smashing bones and pulling out marrow, and like eating intestines, and understanding everything that you can consume, probably the hooves you don't want to eat, but you can make glue out of them. So myself and 8 guys and my fiance Missy, who's 100 pounds soaking wet but can be covered in blood as she's butchering out different things. The men that are attending are wanting to understand, like, how do I take apart an animal? If I start with something big, I get a lot of instruction, and that's really what this is. But they're wanting to learn. There is that curiosity, and I think we are slowly moving back to kind of that rewilding phase, that phase where I should know where my food comes from. Like, I have 2 teenage boys. They don't eat anything wrapped in plastic. When it comes to meat, everything behind me is the menu. What are we eating tonight? It's probably hanging up on that wall, or it's sitting in the freezer over there. So it's understanding that you can be, independent, big daddy, and rely on yourself, or that local community that you kind of reside in.
Well, and you're using, like, I enjoy, as somebody who, Bear knows this, like, I stay off social media for the most part. We run a business, so like I have to stay somewhat in tune with what's going on. But I actually like that you're kind of bridging those worlds, because that it shouldn't be one or the other. It doesn't need to be like, oh, we become these primitive beings again and go back to these old like ways. It's like, but there are foundational truths that exist in nature that I think are us. And if we stop separating ourselves from that, live in tune with those principles while also integrating technology, then the abundance can even be greater. Nature has a general level of abundance. And if we're able to integrate technology with that, I think it can take the abundance to even another level. In the way we live our lives right now could change pretty quickly when we realize like the rat race that we run actually isn't necessary in order for us to have the requisite amount of just like everyday happiness, which actually which typically results from less than more, meaning like as you delayer, that generally bubbles up more than working for 12 hours a day and grinding yourself into the dirt. So
Absolutely. I mean, well said. You couldn't, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, man.
can you a term really quick that you referenced a couple times, and I heard you say it when I was prepping, is ground truth. Can you just unpack kind of exactly what you mean by that, and how you kind of coined that term?
Yeah. So, I mean, ground truth really stems from my old counter intel days. And Barry, you'll be able to attest to this. There's always somebody out there who knows everything, but they have not stepped foot outside the wire. They literally have no ground truth. They don't know, on this particular street, there's a kebab stand, and the guy behind it is selling, IEDs. They don't know the pattern of life that exists within a certain ville, or we could even kind of overlay that over like the natural environment. And how you gain ground truth is by actually experiencing certain events, whether it's going on a backpacking trip or, pick your poison, if you will, but it's the ground truth that is designed and kind of created around your personal experiences. Like everything I wrote in my book, Wild Wisdom, is from ground truth. There's nothing that I pulled from somebody else and said, oh, that's a good idea. That works well here. It's something that I physically done. And from that ground truth comes that kind of level of knowledge, or LOK. And you can kind of gauge and say, all right, my ground truth in living primitively is pretty good. I know how to hunt, I know how to forage, I know how to collect water. But it's my collective experiences over the years that have established that ground truth. So I'm sure Bear can go into countless ways to do lower level entries into a building because he has the ground truth from training and deployments and actual experience to say, this is how you do it. This isn't the best opinion. This is some ground truth on why this tactic is best for doing a lower level entry into, a 4-story building, or typically you want to go from the top, but if whatever the scenario is, you kind of get my point. But I base everything on ground truth. So some doctor or some politician is giving me advice on pick your poison, I just question what's his ground truth. Has he been told this is the best thing, or has he actually experienced it firsthand? Does he have a depth of knowledge, skills, and abilities associated with that claim? And does that claim come from ground truth?
Yeah, so good. COVID comes to mind with that one. I won't take us down a rabbit hole, but we had a doctor on who's an ER doctor on that front, and he of course was at the ground truth, right? He was he was like the head of the ER at a hospital in Canada, and he started to see that the narrative being pushed to him didn't line up with the ground truth that he was seeing, and he started to speak out against it. And there were major consequences for that. And I thought that was a fascinating episode. But it hits right to that point, man. But it's so cool that, if you're writing about it, it's like, no, guys, like I actually did this, and these are the truths that I was able to extract from my experience. So
exactly.
Super cool. So as I understand it, you have a few different training survival kind of tiers that someone can do with you when they immerse themselves like into the wilderness. There's the most primitive,
like no tech, low tech, or high tech.
No, that's the born primitive one. And then medium tech, which is kind of like, all right, a little bit more gentlemanly, and then the high end one where they're got weapons and stuff. Break those down for us and just walk us through that experience. I mean, that sounds fascinating, and I'm curious on like, who are the people that come to you that want to do that? Because I feel like that would be, in my mind, like that 40-year-old accountant who's like in the hamster wheel that finally says, fuck it, I want to go run around the woods with a loincloth for 20 days and have absolutely nothing. Or is it more of the people from your crowd that want to level their game up? Or maybe it's a little bit of both, but break those down for us. And then, I'd love to just hear any unique stories or experiences that came from that with your guests, or I guess clients. I would imagine maybe some of them are transformational. Other ones probably have major buyer's remorse about a day and a half in, where they say, "What the hell am I paying for this?" When I can be in my New York City condo, watching a football game and drinking a beer, eating a brat. I'd love to hear more about that whole program.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as far as high tech, low tech, and no tech, I kind of call those my 3 praxis that you can operate in, you can educate in. And, if we're dealing on that high tech side, well, let me back it up. I kind of base it off that person. All of my classes are specifically designed around that population. I like to run a lot of small groups unless it's a large butchering, because you need a lot more hands in there. But I kind of establish kind of a connection with them and say, let's jump on the phone, let's jump on a Zoom, and let's kind of dive into your pattern of life. And that pattern of life is something that exists in every environment. So the natural world has a pattern of life, and you guys have a pattern of life. And your pattern of life is maybe you wake up, you jump into that hamster wheel, you start spinning, you break off, and you watch a football game and you drink a beer. That could be part of your pattern of life. Maybe somebody else likes to go for hikes on the weekend, but they're all into the REI equipment and that outdoor sort of merchandise. So I try to find where they fit in one of those praxis based off their pattern of life. And if they find themselves like, look, I have no desire in any way, shape, or form to live in a cave for a month, then we'll kind of readjust they're more on that high tech side. They want to use a GPS. They maybe want to use a compass. They want the right way, rain gear and the right boots and all that sort of stuff. So once we kind of establish that, I present to them, what do you do within that pattern of life? Are you going out for a single day hike? Are you going out camping or hunting or whatever that case may be? And then I try to throw them curveballs or scenarios that could exist within that pattern of life. It's kind of those contingency plans. So if you are on a hike and you twist your ankle, you break your ankle, and you've gone remote in whatever region, what's your kind of your pace plan? If you, what's your plan on getting you from safe and secure to your objective, and then all the way back to safe and secure again? And those are kind of what we train in. So if somebody is never going to don a loincloth and carry a homemade bow, but carry, a backpack, a water bottle, and a filter, well, what happens when something breaks? And we work those scenarios kind of within what they're going to find themselves. And within those praxis on that high tech side, let's say, I slowly integrate kind of that low tech. So I introduce them by saying, yes, you might have all your warm weather gear. It's appropriate for the time and place. And you brought a ferrocerium rod, which throws sparks. What happens if you drop it? So we're in that high tech praxis where we're slowly going to introduce some kind of low tech sort of things. And that gives them a taste, and it builds confidence that when they don't have something, they have the ability to create, they have the ability to adapt and overcome. So when we operate in those three different practices, if we're in that no tech, I mean, that's stone tools, you pull out your knives. We've all made stone knives. That's what we're using for duration of time. We're wearing animal skins, and everything comes from the land. That is all about an environment where you're surviving. But when we're in that survival mode, in that no-tech environment, we try to aim to thrive, because survival is really, it's just getting by. That's what it is. It's hand to mouth, getting, you're injured, trying to get back to a safe place, or crawl yourself out, or signal for help. So in that no-tech world, we try to move to thriving. When you have sustainable food and water and comfort and safety, when you can start to create things that give more leisure. Because if you're operating in any other sort of praxis, it's just getting by. The primitive side, you're looking to, maybe you shot a deer and you stretch the hide over an old log and you build a drum. Does it serve into your survival function? No, it's into that thriving. So out of all three zones, the high tech, the low tech, the no tech, it's based on the individual, what they want to learn based off their pattern of life, and then it's a slow introduction into other things. And hopefully someone starts off in that high tech, maybe within a year, 6 months, they're really diving into that low tech to no tech. And that's an easy world to kind of operate in. Maybe you're bringing a wool blanket, employing stone tools, a homemade bow, but you have a steel water bottle that you can boil water in. You're not filtering it. You're just boiling, stream water, something like that. It's not filtered out. It's going to have some particulates, but you're drinking it. So all of these are kind of custom. I don't like to run a lot of calendar courses, as I call it, because then you get 10, 15 people showing up. I've got 10 or 15 people running around with knives and axes. You kind of lose that control. And I want this to be an intimate setting where people have my undivided attention. I only do one-on-ones, or like, small groups, 2 or 3 people where they all know each other. There's no, if there's two guys, one guy is always going to kind of dominate as the alpha, and he kind of puts the other ones to not to shame or anything, but kind of squashes them. But I want it to be learning, and I want it to be intimate, and I want them to understand that they can live, they can thrive in all these different zones, but it's really up to them. Like I can show you what to do, but when push comes to shove, you actually have to do it yourself. And I mean, I've had different, the countless classes of chaos at times, but I mean, I brought families out, and they had an absolute great time, but the biggest complaint was there wasn't a chair to sit in. And not being able to correlate, like I can just put my butt on the ground, or there's a log I can sit on. It was a chair. I brought out dudes that had been aligned to different ODAs, and they kind of operate in that kind of high-tech world with all the weaponry and optics. And they just wanted to get down to kind of the bare bones. Like if they had to E&E, escape and evade, what could they do with what they know? What tools could I provide them? And I mean, on that particular occasion, Bear, I mean, you probably know, like you're walking through the bush and all of a sudden you get this iron smell in the air. Something fresh is dead. You get that like, oh God. And it was me and these two ODA guys were walking into the bush, and we all kind of stopped right on the backside of the snow. And that odor just hit our nose like, man, something's dead right around here. And most people would walk away. But unfortunately for us, we're like, we should go see what it is, because that's what you do. And as we crossed this little knoll, there was a fresh mule deer that had been killed and was brought down by a mountain lion. And I mean fresh to the point where that odor was very pungent, a little bit of steam coming off of it. And I know just from experience that that cat was still in the area. It was somewhere around there. It heard us, smelt us coming, and our presence drove it away. So at that time, it's like, guys, maybe we should fall back. Let's go back to where we're camped out, because we were in the route to check some snares. Let's give it a little time, let it do its thing. And so we cross back over this knoll. I get to the base of the other side of the knoll, and I'm like, you know what? Why don't you guys head back? I'm going to take advantage of this. And they're like, do not do this. I'm like, absolutely. There's fresh backstrap right on that mule deer. I'm going to go get it. I'm like, if you guys don't see me, come, please come look for me. But as I crossed back over the knoll, that mule deer had been dragged probably another 15 yards closer to this large kind of rock face and outcropping. And I just walked over there in like the purest mode of concentration and focus. And there was something in there hiding, watching me that I couldn't see, that could absolutely give me quite a surprise. Pulled out my knife, went down its back, pulled out a big chunk of backstrap, slowly backed up, respected the animal, respected that he killed it. We're in this world together, so it's kind of kill or be killed. Took that backstrap back to the camp where we were. We ate it up for breakfast, but it was one of those extreme situations where, did it have to be done? No, but it's a great point of experience, and I still kind of live with a little do hard things to make you hard, I guess you could say. But
Love that.
in all aspects of teaching, I mean, I started off teaching in a parking lot at a trailhead because I knew that's where the people I was targeting, outdoor people, hunters, backpackers. I lay out a big bison hide or an elk hide, do some hand drills, do some flint napping. Somebody will come over and say, "What are you doing, man? Are you okay? Are you homeless? Like, what's going on?" To give them a quick elevator pitch, print off maybe like 200-300 cards from like Vista Print, give them a business card and say, "Call me if you want to learn how to do these things." And it just kind of went from there. So as that introductory phase, sitting in those parking lots napping, I've had to kind of identify within that target audience and that customer the different needs, wants, and desires that they have, and find a way to address it. I can't address it with 40 people, but I can address it in that small little team, 2-3 people, or really one-on-ones. And that's been 18-year-old kids that have addiction to nicotine and marijuana. Well, let me drag them up in the mountains for 2 weeks. We'll find a real kind of alternative to that. And that's showing them how to go to a stream where there's trout swimming, and then catch those trout with their hand. That they pull out a trout with their hand, and you're like, all right, man, we're eating tonight. And they're like, I can't believe I just did that. It's all those little things that really build into the offerings that I like to provide. And some of them are straight stone tools. Some of them are straight butchering. Some of them are, I just want to go live like a savage out in the woods. Cool. This will be your first experience. Let's give ourselves a little bit of creature comforts, because I don't want to break you on day 2. Maybe on day 10, that would be the goal, but it's good time.
Love that.
Donnie, throughout this journey, like as you said, I mean, it started in a parking lot, and now you're doing one-on-ones that are extended stays in the field. What were some of the, do you have a moment that you look back in a survival situation that was like your darkest moment? And that could be physical or mental, because I'm sure as you're staying in a cave for 30 days, like an idle mind, you start to come up with some interesting things. So are there any moments where you throughout your journey had like an oh shit moment of like that you look back on? And I'm sure the learning, at least in my life, like the learning always is greatest from those moments, but when you're in those moments, it can be a bit hairy. So any that come to mind as like a dark moment?
Absolutely. So not this past summer, but the summer, and this is 2 years ago. A buddy of mine runs the Laughing Coyote Project, which does a lot of homesteading and a lot of homeschool groups. So he had a group of teens that he was going to bring out. And I'd spent a lot of time on the western side of Colorado out in the deserts. And he was like, "Do you know where there's water? We need absolutely, plenty of water." And I'm like, "Yeah, there's this one canyon. It's about 18, 19 miles long, and it's got all sorts of twists and turns. I know there's water at the base because how I've gotten to it before, I would swim across the Colorado River, on like a makeshift little, reed raft, and then walk into the canyon and spend some time there. But he's like, we can't do that with these kids. So can we drop down into the canyon and eventually make our way? I'm like, absolutely. So I went out there to scout it for him and just to ensure that there was water. And you have to kind of shimmy down all this slick rock and crawl through a couple holes. And it's kind of sketchy, but it's doable. And kind of one of those properties of water is it always seeks the naturally lowest point, and it will also pool and collect. It will sit in puddles. It will sit in these little slick rock basins, and you can find water. So eventually, I dropped down to this canyon, and me knowing, having been there, I'm like, I'll just bring one water bottle. Get down to this canyon, and right where the kind of the head of it is, it's completely dry. So I'm like, all right, fundamentals water, let's keep walking. So I keep walking down this canyon, and eventually I get all the way down, probably close to the Colorado River, where there's kind of a big jump and you could see it. And I'm like, God, I have not had anything to drink for probably the past 10 miles. And I'm thinking, okay, this is bad. This is really bad, but you know what you need to do. You can dig for it. You could go to the Colorado River, but it's a really hard down climb. Maybe the best option is turn around and walk back. So you're in a canyon, you're catching pockets of shade. So I'm kind of resting in shade, trying to cool my body. At a certain point, I'm kind of like walking naked and then not walking naked because there's, tons of insects. And then any of that sweat, I'm just wanting air to hit me. But eventually, once I get close to the top, I'm done sweating and I got to climb up this slick rock. Once I peeked out at the very top, I started to black out. I started to get that tunnel vision. And I don't know if it was a little bit of an elevation change or that I knew I was close to my truck and it was okay to die then. But I got to the top and I started getting that tunnel vision, and I, had to go down to a knee. I mean, we've all been to that point where you're like dry heaving, you've got nothing in you, you're no longer sweating. And I'm like, God, this is bad. So I take a little breather and I'm like, what you have to do, and I think I had 2 miles to go, is you have to move from shade to shade. Any plant that gives you a little bit of shade, a piece of juniper or anything, you go from shade to shade and you just get it done. And I did that for probably like 3 hours. And eventually I got to my truck, drank the remnants of like a Gatorade or something, threw it up. But that entire way from shade to shade, I literally thought, I'm going down. I'm going down as heat stroke, heat casualty. This could be the worst way to possibly go, completely dehydrated. And at a certain point, you start kind of getting these like delusional thoughts like, should I put all my clothes on and protect myself from the sun? No, I should just get from shade to shade because that's going to be cool. And like, I'm not peeing. It was getting to the point where I honestly thought, man, this is it. This is it right here. And it was my own negligence of thinking there's going to be water down here. There was no water. Got to my truck, drank that Gatorade, threw it up, and then eventually just kind of turned the truck on and just stayed in the AC. And, sometimes in our vehicles, you rummage around and there's an old half drunk water bottle. And I'm like, all right, just sip it. Just sip it. You had to go back to all those fundamentals of like slow rehydration. And then once the temperatures dropped at night, it was far better. I decided to drive myself out, actually go to like, I think it was a local grocery store, get some like Pedialyte, but I was in bad shape, like genuinely bad shape. And I think I told Missy, I was like, I think I almost died again this weekend scouting for this stuff. But that's on the survival side. But even in personal life, when I was 37, I had a massive heart attack. And the heart attack wasn't because I drank excessively or smoked or did anything wrong. I mean, I was 6 months into a training cycle for a super jungle ultra marathon down in Peru. And it was just genetics. And typically, you don't have heart attacks at 37. My blood is just a little bit more stickier than most. And that encompassed with, just how I was living my life ultimately kept me alive. But it is once I had that heart attack and I quickly realized, for a lot of folks, I don't mind being your example. I'm 6'3", I'm 240 pounds, I'm active, I do a lot of things to stay healthy. If it can happen to me with all these things that I do to maintain health, it can happen to you who smokes 2 packs a day and only eats McDonald's. Um, I'll be your example. Feel free to get yourself in shape. And at that point is when I went on to social media. That was in 2017. And the idea was not to discuss my personal beliefs, political, ideological, all these different things, but was to give people kind of, again, that rewilding, that kind of feral kind of lifestyle, where that lifestyle kept me alive up into that heart attack, and it's going to keep me going forward. So it was really the best day and the worst day. Having 2 young sons at that time, it's kind of like, oh shit, I could have left them fatherless, and all the things I wanted to share with them and teach them as they got older would have been, it would have been zero. It would have been nothing. And I think that lit a fire under me to maintain my personal health, because as fathers, fiancés, brothers and stuff, and especially in the military, we always focus on everybody else but ourselves. And it was the first time in a real long time, instead of pointing the finger out at everybody, hey, I'll help you out, I'll take care of you, I finally pointed at me and said, now you really have to consider everything you do going forward. That's your mental, your physical, your emotional, and your primal well-being. I have a tattoo on my finger of 4 aligned dots: mental, physical, emotional, and primal well-being. And it is a reminder to keep those 4 things aligned at all times. And if one of them starts to get out of whack, I need to bring it in. So if I haven't been out in the bush because I've been going to parent-teacher conferences and had to assist, coaching in a lacrosse game, 1, I have to shower first. That's the first rule, as I've been told. And 2, I need to bring those things back into alignment. And it's something I just live by. Like, my primal well-being is something that Missy knows, that if I've been in the house and, I'm doing things with my kids, like, you need to get out there, you need to get your feet dirty, you need to go drink some water. Because the other important facet of this is, as a father, like, I won't sacrifice things for my kids. And that's more importantly, I'm not gonna sacrifice myself for them. So I'm a dad first. And with that, to be the best dad, you have to be fit. I have to keep those things aligned, and it really keeps me, on track going forward. It's good day, bad day. And even when that bad day happened, I said, if people present me with no value, they're gone. I cut out relationships, people that I had no value with, and they might not have seen a value in me. I'm like, we're done. Like, there's no need for this if that was causing us stress. I learned to sleep more. I learned to take those moments and reflect on the beauty of nature, the beauty of my kids, something very interesting that could be happening. I'm not a big artist guy, but if there's something really interesting in an art form, I should take a second and enjoy it. Even if it hits me in one unique way, awesome, move on. Understanding that if somebody cuts me off in traffic, as much as I would love to chase them down and be like, you SOB, but maybe their wife is pregnant. Maybe there's an emergency. There could be something else going on, and I shouldn't focus on the negative aspect and how it impacted me, but maybe just related to them. So it's really focusing on controlling my emotions, my outlooks, focusing on me. And it's one of those things I convey to a lot of men is, we are providers, we are givers, but we also have to provide for ourselves and give to ourselves, because if we don't, 10,000 men die every year from stupidity. And I was going to be one of those, statistics, if you will. So,
Well, I love that. And I think I've noticed a trend. What you're describing is what I personally I coined for myself, of state maintenance, meaning like, we all know a state where we felt our best. And I think if you get really clear on how you got to that state, it's usually very simple. And that's what I love about yours. It's actually not simple, because I don't think we do a great job of educating like our young and even adults on how to maintain it. But like you said, we've gotten really good at reducing things down to like, to negate some of those, the big ones being like emotional, even like the spiritual side of things. Like, if any one of those pillars are out of balance, your state is going to be effective. But as a culture now, what do? We run for a supplement. We run for like these things that we can add in, when actually a lot of times it's actually removing those and then reconnecting, community, relationship, whatever spiritual totem you have for yourself. Like, it's cool, because what you said is a trend between what I like, some people we've had on here, Brian Johnson, Dr. J. Tita. Like, a lot of individuals who have their own system, everyone's saying the same thing. They put their own different kind of unique twist on it, but it truly is just maintaining these innate systems that make us human. But it's wild because for a lot of individuals, it seems so foreign because we've been taught to like, hey, swallow your emotion. Like you said, as males, sacrifice yourself. And like it that can work in the short term, but then you can really start to delayer, even when you said about a heart attack and then disease, like dis-ease will settle in when one of those pillars is out of balance. And like,
absolutely.
And it's not a matter of having more. It's actually usually like you said, getting outside for some individuals, and for each individual, it varies a little bit, but really just respect and want to honor that you have that code for yourself. Because I think, to me, that's an integrated human, is when you've, through experience, through ground truth, developed your almost own code of conduct. And like I said, that can look different from person to person, but then you really know how to maintain your state, which then allows you to show up best for your children, your fiance, your community. And then what you said is important too. When you have your own code of conduct, it's very clear when somebody it does not resonate with that code of conduct. And then people who are constantly find themselves in toxic relationships, toxic friendships, it's like, I don't think you have a real code of conduct, because when you do, that shit is so obvious to you that right away it's almost like a repellent. Like, nope, like this is, and it's not done in a mean way. It's just like, hey, the energy just isn't there. So really just want to call out that I really appreciate you having that code, because I think we need more of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of men, they do have that. I mean, they all go back to the time, man, I was at my best when I was 25, or, when I was in high school, or even after college. It's like, well, you can still get there. You can still be in that physical best, but how was your mental? How was your emotional? Like it's just keeping all of it aligned. And I think it's an important facet for men to really understand and kind of self-reflect on. It's kind of like a cognitive behavior therapy. It's kind of like, I know what triggers me. Am I going to let it? Cognitively, I can see it, I can accept it, but now I'm going to block it out. And it goes into a lot of different dimensions. And it's pretty powerful for men of all ages, especially young, learning at a younger age how to establish that foundation and kind of allowing it to kind of help build them and shape them as they go forward.
Yeah, one of the cool things that I'm pulling from this is just like, when we look at all the mental health issues our society has, which is like 10x more than it used to be. I think a lot of that is tied directly to, we're getting further and further away from the roots of our evolutionary biology, right? So let's like take example, like, I try to work out 5 days a week, right? That makes me feel better. I come to the office, I'm refreshed, I'm in a better mood, yada, yada. What is that simulating? That's simulating the roots of our evolution that was required to survive. People were exerting themselves physically in the field to get dinner for that night. So that was a natural rhythm of their activity as a human, right? All we're doing when we go to the gym is simulating that, right? Even though we're kind of in the hamster wheel with the LED lights, but it's at least enough that it tricks the body into kind of triggering that. And then, just that exhaustion at the end of the day after, a long day yard work, how good does it feel when you come back in? You know what I mean? And that sense of happiness lift you get versus if you're just sitting on your ass all day on the weekend on the couch, and then you just kind of feel like a piece of shit. So I think it's cool that you obviously are experiencing it because you're in the field. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to make people realize how important it is to achieve an overall kind of status of health unless you're tapping into those, like some of those primitive roots, you know what I mean? And, some people will never get there. That's why, if someone never works out and they're in an office all day and then they go home and watch Netflix and they're eating like crap, like, man, that person, it's going to be very hard for them to find good health and likely happiness. I mean, imagine if you take the people that are really suffering. I bet a lot of them are missing a lot of those boxes that they could be checking. And it really just all goes back to that. Even with diet, we've talked about that on the podcast before, what we're eating. Like if it's not rooted in our evolution, then like you probably shouldn't be consuming it, right? That's why, when people say I'm vegan, I'm always like, man, to each his own, but we had one employee here who just went from being vegan to eating meat again. And I just kind of joked in the kitchen. I was like, well, how do you feel? And she's like, oh my God, I feel unreal. So much better. Like, I don't know why I did that. It's rooted in, okay, well, that's what we're designed to eat. You know what I mean?
Well, and there too, and Bear, you've heard me nerd out about this, and and Donnie couldn't be a better example of it, is where I can start to get fired up too, is that you can actually perceivably eat healthy now when it actually isn't healthy anymore. And what I mean by that is like, you can buy vegetables that have a ton of glyphosate on them because they're being sprayed with Roundup that's dysregulating your immune system. You can buy meat that's been those cows or chickens has never moved more than 2 inches, or that's an exaggeration. Let's give it 10 feet during their whole life. They've been pumped full of antibiotics. Now, is that better than nothing? Yes. And of course, I would never want to judge anyone that that's what they have to eat. But there's where it comes back to food sovereignty of like the next level for us as a species to realize like, no, we're not spraying a fucking chemical thing on all of our vegetables that now doesn't even work anymore. So they have to create 5 more variations that are less resistant to the Roundup. It's like, we need to learn how to grow our own vegetables or buy from local farmers who still know how to actually use somewhat traditional farming techniques to grow vegetables. We need to either source our meats ourselves through hunting or have a local farmer that you've built a relationship with. I've nerded out about the raw milk. Like, that was kind of my initial question to Donnie, and I actually am optimistic because I'm seeing that interest grow. But yeah, it's in that same vein of like, it's wild what we've forgotten of like where our bodies operate best, and nutrition is a huge pillar of that. But then that's where I get pissed off about like, and here's where like when Big Daddy steps in and there's all this farmland being bought up, there's all this stuff being sprayed on stuff. It's like, we've got to shift away from that, and the consumer can drive that. Like, that shouldn't be us always pointing the finger saying like, why are they doing this? It's like, hey, we're allowing that through our dollars we're spending. If we're not buying organic produce, if we're not buying from local farmers, you are contributing to a system that has just gotten out of control and is just like, it's corporate capture. It's money driven with no awareness at all about what's actually best for the human body and spirit.
Yeah. I always call it eating wild. If you eat wild, that's your best diet. Eat seasonally, eat wild. And I know it can be hard to eat seasonally because like you can get strawberries year round pretty much, and a lot of farmers will grow it. But if you eat wild and you eat within season, that's how our bodies are designed. Like roots, tubers, meats, fruits, seeds, you know what I mean? If it's got more than like 2 or 3 ingredients, it's probably not the best. And then, you know, you were talking about a vegan. There was a portion of time I experimented with the vegan thing. I wanted to see what it was like, and absolutely hated it. But the biggest return was it forced me to learn plants that I could eat out in the wild. I removed the whole menu option off, and it was that straight raw thing. But that gave me, it forced me to get the ground truth into what it is to actually eat in that sort of environment. Wild greens, roots, tubers, fruits, seeds, things to that extent. It was a great learning experience, but I was happy to rejoin the normal human race and eat meat, you know? But like, I think it's important for people to know that they have the ability to go out and forage for food responsibly. They have the ability to go out and hunt meat that is the cleanest and purest form of meat that you can come across. Those are all options. It just starts with a bit of education, whether it's picking up a book and reading it, or finding some local instructor that will show you how to find the top 5 mushrooms in your local area that can be as big as basketballs that you could feast on for a solid week, or mix it into stews and broths. It all exists. We've just become reliant on the simplicity of getting our food, which has removed us from that primal sort of mindset of we have to do this. So, I mean, I've got a mule deer tag, Missy's got an elk tag, and I also have an elk tag. And we know that is our meat going forward into and through winter into spring until we get on some hogs down in Texas. But yesterday I pulled out a huge trout, gutted it out, put it in a vacuum sealer, and that's in the freezer because that will be a fish we'll eat. I mean, for us, we are always looking to acquire meat sources. And my boys have grown up eating meat in the form of what's for dinner? It's meat. Cool. And it's just meat. And they've become accustomed to eating those sort of things. And whether it's a wild hog in Texas, it all comes home and it all gets consumed. And it's absolutely delicious. I mean, God, I love meat.
You will get no pushback from me and Tony on that one.
Yeah.
Right on, man.
Well, Donnie, this has been cool, man.
Yeah, man.
I want to give you the opportunity to kind of plug your businesses. And this is, I mean, I love what you're doing. Honestly, like, it makes me want to get back in the mix. You know, I have some exposure to this stuff for my time in the military, but not anywhere near, even close to what you do. I know enough to be dangerous, but it almost makes me want to like get that itch to be like, all right, let's go do something shitty for like 10 days. And
how about this? I'll throw you guys an invite right now. On October 9th, here we go.
Oh shit!
On October 19th in Colmont, Colorado, I'll be doing a bison butchering class. So if you guys want to attend, you can film stuff, you can do whatever you want. But we're going to go out there and the farmer's going to dispatch this bison, bring it over to a nice little aspen glen, and with stone tools, raw flakes, the rawest form of a knife that you can come up with, we're going to take apart this megafauna, break out the meats. We'll grill some. I like to pull the ribs out and then smother it with bone marrow and just eat the bone marrow, eat the ribs. You guys are fully invited to join me out there with 8 other students, because there's a lot of pushing, there's a lot of pulling. And I know we work out, we stay physically fit, but this will be a whole different dynamic of working out. Bring some meat back to your families. And so that's an invite. If you guys want to join me, I'll give you the details. We can connect and you come on out.
Well, Donnie, I have to take a rain check on this one, only because my 3rd child is on the way and the due date is at the end of October. So if I happen to be out there and she has birth, she would not.
She would know.
She would care, but she wouldn't also. It's not like I would never hear the end of it.
Can you
but
imagine if that's why you missed the birth?
I know. I'm butchering a bison.
I was butchering a bison with a rock.
Yeah. But Donnie, love to connect and love to definitely take a rain check if there's ever something else.
For sure.
I would really enjoy getting to spend some time and watching you in your element. So I appreciate the offer though.
Yeah, Donnie, we got to get together at some point. We're actually the week before that, we're doing a skydive elk hunt experience.
That's what I'm talking about.
in Utah. It's a fundraiser thing we do. This is the first time we've done it, but some donors bought the experience, and we're going to take them skydiving, and then Aaron Snyder's going to guide them into an elk hunt, and then we're just going to shoot guns and once they get back and take them in ATVs and do shit like that. But I definitely I definitely want to get together at some point and engage with what you're doing. And for people that are interested, I think I have it in my notes here, but what's the best way? I see we got DonnieDust.com. Is that where they can go for any information on the different experiences you offer?
Absolutely. DonnieDust.com is kind of the portal to, connecting with me, looking at, book options, kind of what's going on, my overall pattern of life, and that kind of social as well as primitive world. There's links there. More importantly, people have questions. I'm reachable. I have this mentality and a philosophy that if somebody is watching a video or likes a video or leaves a comment, I will make every effort to reply to them. Sometimes it's those little things. I acknowledge that those people have helped me in certain facets of success as far as being able to reach an audience. And I can't get to everybody, but usually if I post something or share something, I'll reply about 30 minutes after. And, you send me an email, you're going to get a response, and it's from me. I wish I had a team of people that could answer stuff, but it's hard. When you run a business, the hardest thing is giving portions of it up to other people to kind of take control. So, but yeah, DonnieDust.com. Same thing on YouTube. You can find all sorts of, information on YouTube. My books are available on DonnieDust.com. You can sign up for Survival Mastery at DonnieDust.com. But keep, live wild and keep enjoying it. You know what I mean? You can't go wrong with it.
Yeah, and I'll close out with this just for the listeners. I think just given where we're at in our society, especially those of us that are parents, I feel we all have an obligation to at least have a basic level of knowledge and foundation in the event worst case scenario were to happen, right? Obviously there's people that have their survival bunkers and they got 10 years worth of food and ammo, and that's to each his own. I can roll with that, but that's personally not what I'm going to do. But at the very least, if something major were to happen tomorrow and you're a father of 3, are you positioned to lead your family to safety within that scenario? So at the basics, for me, I have weapons, I have cash, I have a bunch of MREs. I have a couple different Pelican cases full of outdoor gear, jet boil stoves, tents, tarps, basic tools. All right, so in the event things were to go crazy south, do I have the means to protect my daughter and get away from whatever's happening and get off the grid and at least have a chance, right? And I think 99.9% of our society likely have zero ability to even start. So, if you're a mother or father, whoever, it might be something you at least want to start thinking about. And things like this is a great way to introduce you to that through someone that, this is their jam. And so but then of course there's the benefits that we talked about beyond, if worst case scenario never happens, you have all these mental and physical health benefits that come from it. So, I don't want to scare tactic anyone, but I've actually been getting a lot of questions from people DMing me, particularly with like weapons and like, hey, I'm worried about what's going to happen with our country. Like, what do you recommend? Night vision goggles and body armor, and like questions I've never gotten, which is wild, right? And some of them are from women. You know what I mean? People are starting to think like this. So it's not meant to be a scare tactic, but at the very least, I think we all need to have a plan. And it's like, okay, can you read a map? Do you know how to, you look at a compass and plot yourself where you are? And, of course, you be able to use a GPS, but you need to have a fallback to that because you might run out of batteries or whatever. You know what I mean? And it's not, this isn't rocket science stuff. This is stuff in a couple of days you can be somewhat proficient in. So that would just be my kind of last thought for the listeners. But it's awesome that, I want to get in the mix with you, man, because to learn from a pro, that would be badass and take it to the whole next level. But, that's over to you, Tony, for closing it out.
No, I love the conversation. Appreciate what you're doing and kind of your approach. And I think my favorite part is you leaning on the ground truth side of things, because I think we have a lot of people who don't use that as a compass and kind of have a lack of integrated or earned wisdom. I love the quote by Carl Jung, like, or what, and then I just blanked on it. Something about unearned wisdom, and that's sad that I just referenced it and can't recall it. But what you are doing has
take your word for it.
Yeah, hey, if you search Carl Jung unearned wisdom, you'll figure out what I'm talking about. But yeah, yours is earned wisdom. So appreciate you hopping on and kind of sharing your experiences. It was a great conversation.
Right on. Bear, Tony, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. You guys keep leading by example, because that's the best. So my hat goes off to you.
Thank you, man. And hey, if you want any of our outdoor gear, like for your high-tech experiences, extended field stay stuff, let us know. We'd love to get you kitted out. We got base layers, mid layers, outer layers. We just got a stretchy rain shell, it's a 4-way stretch rain shell, which is honestly pretty unreal. And then a barrier like wind weather jacket too, which is super Gucci and high end. So we'd love to kit you out if you're interested. Obviously, no obligations. Hit us up. We'll get your sizes and the team will get it out to you. Yeah,
man, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much. I would happily take you up on that offer, because I still got to play in all the different kind of zones, if you will. But yeah, man, thank you guys so much.
Heck yeah. All right, buddy.
Donnie.
Be safe out there. Good chatting with you.